50-some years ago, where they made guns that were known all over the world. With me tonight is Bob Wolpe on my left, who lives outside of Fulton a few miles. Bob is a skilled woodworker who has been doing custom work at his shop since retiring after 22 years with Black Clawson. Some of his precision work can be seen in many of the churches of Fulton, the Scruple Mansion, and the new Beachshire restaurant, now the Carlton. He worked at Hunter Arms from 1942 to 1950. John Zarekny was a gun repairman at Hunter Arms from 1945 to 1951, but he could not be with us tonight. And taking his place is Fern Parsons, the town historian of the town of Valney. And Fern will tell her about her father when he worked at the Arms. John Zarekny was a veteran of World War II who took on the job training there after being discharged. Rich Beyer, on my left, is a owner of Beyer Offset Printing in Palermo. He is a gun collector and is most knowledgeable about firearms. John Hunter Sr. of Sterling Valley managed to accumulate a considerable amount of money while he was raising a family of 6 sons and 1 daughter. He set out to form a family manufacturing enterprise in which all the family could play an important role. In 1888, he formed the Hunter Arms Company and built a 3-story factory on the corner of Hubbard and Ontario Streets in what is now the city of Fulton. The Hunters had many other local factories, including the Battle Island Pulp and Paper Mill, but the most well-known was the Hunter Arms. The Hunter Arms survived as the rest of their empire fell apart. Bob, would you show the Hunter Arms poster reproduction? I think probably Terry has already done that, but, and explain about how that was.
This is not an original speech. It's a reproduction that was brought to me from Ohio. But it's typical of what I used to see in the gunworks along the walls. And it was primarily their advertising to go into hardware stores and gun shops throughout the Northeast. There were many other versions of this. This is the only one I have at the present time. I want to go to the next one.
Yeah, would you show the photo of the exterior of the original 4-story building?
Right. This is a picture of the original Hunter Arms plant. This picture was taken from what would be North 1st Street, where Black Clawson sits now. The original building was 4 stories. After they got into making guns, they decided to add a 5th story to the building. And that was the start of their downfall. The 5th story was added for storage, work area, and many heavy machinery pieces were put up there. And then on top of that, there was a small, this is a view of the 5 stories right there. They put on a water tower. This building was approximately 400 foot long by 75 foot wide and 5 stories high, and was all brick with a wood frame interior. The weight of that water tower caused the building to sway and bend. And over the years, it bent to the east, so that when they shut down in 1950, from the roof to the ground was out of plumb 36 inches on that building. All that kept it from going down was the fact that in their manufacturing, they had long line shafts inside of the building that acted just like springs. So wind would blow the building and it would come back and forth. And as long as it was doing that, they weren't too worried about it. Then in 1949, they had a section of floor cave in on them, and that was the beginning of the downfall. The state came in, questioned them about it, and started looking at the building. They repaired the floor, got back into production, but within 2 years, they were out of there.
Bob, excuse me. Could you explain about the water power and how they got?
The original power source for running the gunworks was taken from the old canal, which went on the east side of the gunworks. There was a channel coming down from First Street that the boats used to go up. And up at the end of the gunworks, there was a flume to take the water down to a water wheel. And then under the building. And that race ran the entire length of that building, went down and under First Street and came out in the river. And the only thing you can see of it today is the guardrails on the bridge where it went under First Street.
Oh, thank you, Bob. You're covering that now? Have you got that all covered? Okay, go ahead.
And I got a picture here of the work area that shows the line shafts and the pulleys. And this is about what I remember when I first came in there in 1942. It was a maze of belts, pulleys, and in it was all machinery. Some floors did not have all the shafting down through, but this was how they transferred that power from that water wheel to these line shafts. Eventually, the electric motors, the water wheel was replaced. You want one with that?
Yeah, I would like to get, yeah, you can take a break for a minute if you want. You want to take a little break for a minute?
Okay.
All right. Fern, I understand that your father worked there for a few years. Could you tell us a little about that?
Well, I was young, but he knew Charlie Finner, who was, I believe, like
He was the
superintendent there. And he got talking to my dad and told him that if he'd been through grade school out in the West where he was born, but he'd not had high school with the math that he would have gotten, so he did a math course at night at the Fulton High School. And then he went on to work at Hunter Arms and Remington Rand and Diltz after that. But he worked in Lloyd Du Bois, who lives on the Silk Road. He used to work there. And I'm sorry Joe Smith can't be here tonight because he's a good friend.
Joe got the flu.
He has the flu, and he worked there too, Bob told me. I hadn't realized that.
Yeah.
But I was always very proud of my dad and the work that he did.
Fine. Thank you. Rich, would you show us your ideal grade Hunter shotgun?
Sure.
And explain the features of it and anything you'd like to add about the other Hunter guns.
Okay, fine. What did your father do there? Did you mention that in?
Yeah, he was a tool maker.
Just a tool. He was a tool.
They were great for jigs and fixtures.
It was funny you mentioned Charlie Fenner. Another ex-employee, Al Van Stanford, who was since dead, mentioned that Charlie Fenner used to take great pride in his job, and even in the bad weather, if it was really bad, he had a big Buick. He used to drive around town. In the snowstorms, he even go and pick the employees up to make sure that they got there. This is an ideal grade L.C. Smith. This was the type of gun that would be engraved by either Ollie Wardhall, Charlie Jarrett, not necessarily Krause. Al Krause was Hunter Arms master engraver. And the Smith gun started out, let's take it back to the beginning. Their standard gun was called a field grade. Then the next grade up was an ideal grade. And then they had a specialty grade, and then they had a crown grade, and then they had a series of higher grades going all the way up through. The highest grade would be a deluxe. Now, that type of engraving was done by a man, Al Krause, who was their master engraver, of course, and I imagine Bob will get into that a lot more. But Al Krause, well, as for example, let's leave Al for a minute and get back to the case card. Part of what made a Smith gun was the quality of the way it was put together, and the fact that supposedly it would never shoot loose. The more you used the Smith gun, supposedly it would just keep getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and very seldom they would ever get to the point where they would be unsafe to be fired. They took great pride in that. They took also great pride in their distinctive case coloring, color case hardening. And that was done by another employee, Sam Sherman. Well, he was probably not the only one that did it, but he certainly was one of them. And he had it down to a fine science. Yeah. The tricky part of this was Al Kraus, that engraver, would a lot of times inlay gold into the receivers of these guns, 2 or 3 different color golds. It'd be yellow gold, orange gold, and green gold for like the hat on a hunter and things like that. And in order to achieve this color case hardening, the temperatures required were almost to the degree that gold melts. So it was very, very critical that they didn't get the things too hot, or else Al Kraus might spend 3 months, for instance, putting gold into the receiver of one of these guns, and in a flash it would melt out of the firearm. So that color case hardening was a very precise formula. How they heated it in various containers with charcoal and things like that, and at a certain point, when it got to a certain temperature, they would take all these color case hardened parts and they would quench them in water. And part of the way they got the color was not only the way how fast they quenched it, but what they had in the water and in the temperature of the water. And I'm not positive, but I think I recall Sam Sherman mentioning to me that they even had water bubbling through their quench. I wasn't sure. Did you ever hear that story, Bob?
No, but
Yeah.
what gave it the color?
Well,
It was a bone meal.
it was the bone meal
Yep.
wrapped, in the charcoal.
Yep.
And that supposedly gave it the color, but Smith guns had a distinctive color. And each company had their own method of doing this color case hardening. So anyway, as far as the engraving goes, this is the first grade up. And this, I said, mentioned would be done by either Ollie Warthall or Charlie Jarrett, back at the time that I knew, in the 40s, I would assume. And it was amazing how great engravers they were. Now, I know Charlie mentioned to me that, I'll set this down so you get a fairly close look at the engraving that's on that his job was to do 6 of those guns a day. And he said, and towards the end, he was actually able to do his 6 guns a day, and Ollie Warthall was another engraver there, and still have time to do piecework. They could earn extra money when they got above and beyond their own daily quota of what they had to do in doing additional engraving or other things. And these deluxe, the highest grade guns that as Al Kraus would engrave, would take up to almost a year at times. And what Al would do would be to come up with these sketches and mail them back to the people to see if they liked what he was going to put on them, and then he would go ahead and do the engraving. But a lot of the original work on the gun was done by either Charlie Jarrett or this Ollie Warthall. Some of the preliminary work, so Al didn't have to work on one particular gun for the whole year. He would work on probably 3 or 4 different guns in the course of a week or something like that. And it was very, very exacting, demanding, close work. Now, excuse me for a second. This is a picture right here of Al Kraus. He came up from Syracuse to Hunter Arms. I'm afraid I don't know the year. I asked Charlie Jarrett before he died, and unfortunately I don't either. He never mentioned, or I forgot the year that he came up. You never knew, did you, Bob?
Well, the original engraver for L.C. Smith in Syracuse was a guy by the name of Zahn.
Yeah.
And his boy, and then when he came to Fulton and worked a while, and Al Kraus came when they came to Fulton.
Yeah.
But
I didn't know the year.
he was a very exact engraver, and the government used to keep track of, because